Hello. Hi, this is Rick de Jager, and I wanted to make a video today to discuss credit syndrome and how kids in this particular category could harm themselves or others around them. As always, I make these videos because I think it's a very difficult environment parents of CDC children live in the sense that they often have a lack of support around them. We definitely did. And just a lack of understanding of the complexities that the combination of factors can combine. And so I'm doing these videos to try and create an accessible platform, transparency for parents themselves, but also for the people around them, because it's often difficult to get this information. So I'm speaking as a parent. I'm not speaking as a medical professional, and I'm just trying to give my perspective on things, and hopefully that helps. So yeah, talking about self-harm, I think it's important to give my experience with self-harm. I'm going to discuss what we have sort of witnessed from his behavior, the harm that he can do to himself, the risk he can also, give to others, but also forms of harm where, it was unintended. He did not intend to harm himself or others, but it just kind of happens because of the situation. Yeah, this is the experience of someone who's lived through it, trying to share it with somebody else who's probably going through it. So this is not clinical information. There is just generally a lack of this kind of information, and hopefully I can provide some insights into some tangible actions that we've done. And by no means am I going to say that we are the final product. Everything's perfect in our household. It definitely is not. But on the whole, we try to make things better, and we try to do better every time. So first, I want to agree on the problem. So there's a couple of things that are coming together here, which is unavoidable with CDC. So the first and very big topic is the combination of having both a learning disability and autism at the same time. And often in cases of CDC, these two could be quite severe. And bringing these two together creates a new situation. And that's often for people badly understood, because like when a child has a learning disability, that's one thing. Or if another child has autism, that's one thing. But when a child has both combined in one, that does create quite a significantly elevated new scenario. And people don't often really understand or appreciate that. So that is one big topic. The second for me would be particular sensory triggers that might trigger, in particularly in my case, my son to harm himself. Thirdly, we need to discuss some of the frustrations that can happen and how you can deal with those. And then lastly, some forms of unintended harm, in particular, hypertonia, in our case at least, again, in the combination of the sensory spectrum that my son has, can create situations where he does harm himself without intending it to. So it is something to be aware of. So having a combined learning disability and autism, that does create a new situation. So it has to be the biggest elephant in the room in any discussion about CDC. So, when you are talking to your medical people like your GP or others, I do think you need to amplify the fact that your child has both, and that does create quite an alarming situation. So just to explain what's going on. So on the one hand, if you've got a child that has a learning disability, in CDC often this is a severe one. So clinically, my son, he has a severe learning disability. So hey, you're talking about an IQ range of, somewhere between 45 and 55. It's quite low. Now that in itself can create moments where harm could be a factor, like just simple frustrations where things aren't going their way. But again, those situations don't necessarily have to be very often. When a child has autism, on the other hand, they can equally have moments where harm could be a factor. But often these kids, they do have some form of communication and interaction, and it is possible to manage away some of that harm through active engagement. In CDC kids, we don't have that luxury in a sense, because communication is extremely poor. Obviously, we're not talking about speech. My son, he can't talk, but often sign language is a big stretch. So how you can communicate is extremely limited, and so those frustrations, they tend to accumulate and become a problem. Yeah. So what does this mean for us? I think from an autism perspective, what you're seeing on the one hand is that my son, he really likes to bite his left hand. So often he has a very reddish, kind of peeling kind of left hand that is, often a potential source of infection. So that's an issue. What we also see is that he can get upset at something because it's not going his way, or we ask him to do something that he doesn't want to do. And that means banging your head. That could be in protest against an obstacle that's in the way, like a door, or that could be against a person that is in his way. That could be me or my wife or anyone else, to be frank. So to address this, there are things that we do to try and alleviate some of the pressure. So the first and most important is to build some routine in the day, and if at all possible, to build routine in the activities that you do. So if you brush his teeth, do it in the same way. If you go to eat, try to do it always in the same way, etc., etc. Because the routine actually is a form of communication to him, because it tells him what to expect, and because things are going the way he expects them to go, he partakes in the activities. Once the routine breaks down, he tends to break down. So yeah, I would definitely try to build more routine into your day if at all possible. So yeah, this is a silly example, but giving a replacement for the harmful behavior. So often you see that from a sensory perspective, my son, he needs to use his mouth. So if it's not his left hand, then he wants to bite into something else. He tries to lick every surface he tends to find, which is really annoying, especially when you're outside and in the park and there's a bench and stuff like that. It's not a very hygienic thing. So yeah, there is this silly example of my son using a plastic water bottle. They have ridges on them, and then that's a great occupier for his mouth. But there are loads of other replacements that you can provide. Um, so during dinner, we like keeping him busy, and keeping him busy means for us two things. One thing is we use video, so like YouTube, and we play Peppa Pig and things like that. That keeps him visually occupied. And we tend to have some sensory toys there, so things that he can particularly feel with his hand. This could even be cooking utensils, as silly as that. It could be things made out of wood, so there's like a grainy thing. It could be bite rings. It could be many, many different things just to keep his hands occupied as well. And then we tend to find that when we try to eat with him, that he is relaxed enough that he'll consume his food. And even if we're lucky, that he is able to eat himself, although that's usually quite hard. And yeah, the last point for me is providing deep pressure. I will go into this more, but what you tend to find is that, especially from an autism perspective, deep pressure therapy tends to have a great effect. So providing a very grounded, very firm hug could already be a significant help. In my case, what happens a lot is that I carry him a lot, which is bad for my back and has created issues. But you do tend to see that that's where he is most comfortable, when he is getting that hug, when he is getting held. Um, so sensory triggers. I think in our situation with a CDC child, it is impossible to not be aware of deep pressure therapy, or just deep pressure in general. So I would look it up. I would look at the different ways in which kids experience deep pressure, because you see it in their behavior that they need it. So what tends to happen with kids that have autism, they tend to not have the same shields that you and I have that attack our senses. So whether it's sound or wind or vibration or light or whatever, we tend to be able to manage our senses quite well. Kids don't really have that. All the senses get attacked all the time. And so when there are loud noises, activities, lots of people, it could be overwhelming and extremely frightening for a child. So deep pressure allows a kid to distract the mind. You get a very deep focal point on a thing. This could be rocking. Especially my son, he does it a lot, so he can be in bed and then just rock from left to right. You get the classical Hollywood picture of a kid sitting up and moving forward and backwards, but that's not the case in our case. Our son, he rocks from left to right when he's lying down. And this is a form of deep pressure. You're putting a form of pressure on your head that is pushing out other senses, that is distracting other senses. So yeah, so this is deep pressure, and this deep pressure can be applied in many different ways. For example, there are pressure vests. You could be on a swing. There are many different forms. And yeah, one of the things that we do to try and alleviate or address this particular thing is to build a sensory room for our son. So we're still building it at the moment. A lot has been done. But the goal of a sensory room is to create moments, locations, for him to be able to get that deep pressure, to distract his mind and to get his senses calmed in such a way that, when he comes out of the sensory room, that he's not so overwhelmed and he can engage and he is more grounded. So perhaps a few examples. So there is quite a few here, and by no means do all. What I'm trying to do here is create a bit of a mood board of some of the things you could be doing, and there are probably 2,000 other things that you could also be doing. But hopefully some of these things may inspire a search journey for what may be relevant to your child. But yeah, so top left, we have bite rings. Those are individual armbands that are stacked on top of each other. So just one armband is enough. They're great for putting in the mouth. Child is able to chew on them without harming their teeth, and it keeps the mouth occupied and should calm the child down. A swing bag, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a hammock, and a child, it sort of hangs from the ceiling, and a child can be lying inside of it, and it can be a great comfort to get your movement senses stimulated while you're hanging there. So again, it can be a great source of calming. Bottom left, you have a vibration plate. So you can put a mattress on top of it, or you even have mattresses nowadays that vibrate. When a child lies on top of that, again, that can be very calming because you are creating this focal point on the vibrations. So, you lose those other senses. The top, then we have a bean bag. Also could be very effective at delivering that deep pressure. On the bottom, we have just a projector, really. It's a projector that is projecting a particular pattern. It could be the night sky, it could be waves, it could be anything, really. It could be visually very distracting or enabling you to focus on it, and can be a great help. Another option, and that's to the right there, could be one of those bubble tubes. So you have a big tube. Sometimes these tubes can be like 2 or 3 meters tall, and you have everything in between, from the very short to the very tall. And they have a light at the bottom, and there are bubbles being blown throughout the tube, and it can be visually very stimulating as well. So yeah, those two together could be great. In the middle there, we have a bowl bath. I don't know what you call it in general, but in Dutch we would call it a ballenbad, a bowl bath. When you lie in that, again, it gives you this sense of being weightless. It could be a great form of therapy, again, to occupy the mind. The trampoline could be really effective. My son, he really likes it, especially when I hold him and we jump up and down together. It gives him this great sense of weight on his head, and you can just see him light up. So yeah, I would definitely recommend going to something of a trampoline park or whatever with your child. They would probably love that sense of jumping up and down. And then at the right, you have those weighted vests. They're very heavy. You can definitely feel it. And yeah, it can just be another thing that a child, feels more grounded and it can actually really calm them down. So I definitely recommend. They can be expensive, so I would highly recommend. And also, this could be with any of the other activities here. Talking to your doctor and seeing whether maybe through a physio or something else you could try some of these things out and see what the effects are. Another option could be, and this is specific to us perhaps, but there is a park nearby that is specifically developed for individuals with a disability, specifically also a disability that may be mental. And they have a very grand sensory room built, and then you can rent that for a fee per hour, and your child can then run across, but at the same time, while the child is really enjoying him or herself, you could really sort of see what triggers their sensory profile in the best way, and then you get ideas about what might be best for them. So yeah, you could perhaps go to a sensory room. There are likely providers on the internet, maybe with physical stores, that produce equipment for people with disability, and they may have such rooms to demonstrate what they can sell. And maybe you're not there to buy, but it gives you an opportunity to experience some of these tools, and how you then go about getting these things embedded into your routine, into your situation with your child. That's up to you, but I do think there are opportunities potentially for you to experience some of these things. So some of the common frustrations that my son has is that he wants something, or we need something from him, and we can't communicate it. He will get upset, and in particular, the object of choice to use at that point is his head. So he will hit the floor, he will hit the door, he will hit me or my wife, and sometimes he even bangs his head on things where it's just completely unproductive, because he will really hurt himself. So the thing to note there is, of course, watch out. You don't want a child to, of course, damage his head too often, and especially too hard, because he can really, do some damage. But at the same time, we also want to limit as much as possible these frustrations. So what can we do? And I would say the most important thing is communication. And so, yeah, what can you do if you can't communicate? So I would say there are ways in which you communicate, but it's extremely limited. I thought I had another slide, but I don't see it. So the way to communicate, I would categorize in three areas. First, I would say communicating with objects. Second, I would say communicating with sign language. And third, I would say communicate with speech. Now, the first one, using objects, could be really effective, especially when you have that combination of the learning disability and the autism. Some objects will elicit a great central role in especially my son's routine, whether it's a toy or something he's seen on television, or something that he needs to do on a daily basis, like brushing his teeth. There are some objects in his life that he really associates to particular activities. So if you're going to go on a car ride, maybe you have a little toy car that looks like your car, and then you show the car to him, and then he knows that you're going to go in the car. If you're going to go to grandma and grandpa, maybe there is an object that associates with their house. You want to go outside, again, you maybe there is a particular activity that you do outside. Maybe it's like a swing that you get like a small a toy swing, and then you can show the swing, and then they know where we're going to go outside to the swing, and the list can go on. So objects could be really helpful to instruct what to expect, and because the child then expects what we're going to do, there is more understanding and more appreciation for what's happening. The second was going to be sign language. Now, what I said at the start was that sign language is a stretch, and genuinely it is a big stretch. But we have noticed that he does understand sign language. So as much of a stretch that it is, I would actually recommend using it, but using it in a smart way. So that means don't sign everything. If you sign language everything, the child will not know one iota of what you're saying because it's just too much. So I would focus on some main ones and start with one. And you potentially could be doing that one for the next 6 months, and only in 6 months' time he will get it. But every tool in your tool chest is going to be very important. So every sign language that you can teach is a great win. So for us, and a really important one was to finish, to stop doing something. And I should say at this point that sign language is not universal across the world, sadly, as surprising as it may sound, because to me, sign language could be universal. But sign language in the UK is very different to sign language here in the Netherlands. So definitely look up your version of that particular word, and then you can give the right sign language. But to finish an activity, it's very clear that we need to move on, we need to do something else, or we're not allowed to do something right now. So it's a very clear communication of like, we need to move on, this is it, done. Another really important one for us was to eat or to drink. Those two are very important to his daily routine. To be absolutely frank, Matteo doesn't actually get the sign language for eating or drinking, but we have a board, so it's kind of like a wood panel that sort of has feet below it. I just made it by hand, and stuck to it we have two speech buttons, and you can get speech buttons everywhere. The cool thing about speech buttons is they usually have like a transparent cover, so you can put like a little picture behind the cover of like the activity. So drinking and eating, it's very clear to him what that is, and when you then press it, it's my wife actually saying the word to eat or to drink. So he actually uses those buttons as opposed to the sign language to say that he wants to eat or he wants to drink right now. So that is quite powerful. And then he does the sign language for another or more. Whenever we're doing something that he really enjoyed, he wants it again. Or when we're eating and he wants more, he wants more. That's kind of how we use it. It's a little bit silly because technically those two words have two different sign languages, but I do actually think you can use them combined, and it does help to give him what he wants. So yeah, it's really good that he's at least doing some sign language, very limited, but it's something. So yeah, so sign language, I would definitely give it a go. Decide amongst yourselves, of course, what the most important sign language is now. To just help the child understand what is expected from him or her, to create more predictive power for himself of what is going to be happening. If he anticipates things, if he understands what's being done, the likelihood that he's going to get frustrated is going to go down. And that's really important. And so my third point was going to be speech. Now, this is really tricky because I've just sort of, explained why these very limited forms of communication are still very challenging, and why do we then try to achieve speech? Well, I would say motor skills, especially fine motor skills, like talking, they're very difficult to learn. And so doing what you can now, I think, is going to be really important if at a future date you hope speech is an option. And for me, I'm always going to bet on the fact that my son is going to talk. I can't not aim for that goal. So the situation we have today is that he can say dada, and we do actually believe that he understands that I'm dada, although there are, he does use dada a lot for things that are not me, but whenever I'm there, he does say it. So perhaps, but he really struggles with mama. He just can't say the sound at all. Sort of he can't generate it, and it's a very basic sound. So often we're like in the car, and he will be babbling like da 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 da, and he'll be babbling because me and my wife are talking to each other, and he wants to partake. So in our situation, what we do is we drop the conversation and we kind of try to talk to him, and he really likes that, and we go back and forth. But as part of that exercise, we do try to make the sound, so that he will try to replicate that sound as well. So far, it's not successful, but we have to keep trying. And then hopefully, as time progresses, then we can add other sounds to it, and hopefully at some point we can then start to develop some speech. But yeah, that is going to be challenging. Okay. Unintended forms of harm. The elephant in the room with CDC is hypotonia, i.e., we very much focus on harm being created through mental disabilities, but actually some of the harm can also come from hypotonia. So how that translates for us is, when he's actively walking, when he is not focused on anything else and he's just focused on what he's doing at that moment, his walking could be really good. Not dissimilar from a normal child, if you will. He's now 4 years old. His walking is pretty decent. But the moment some sort of fear kicks in, he hears a loud noise, or there is a car driving by, or whatever, he could suddenly lose all of his thinking. His walking becomes very clumsy, and he trips over himself and makes a bad fall. The same thing can happen because he is tired. This could be because he didn't sleep, or because he is just tired. He can become very clumsy, trip and fall. The good thing to see is when he's not afraid, when he's not in that sort of danger mode, you do see him actively looking at the floor and then stepping in a way to avoid a particular obstacle. Yeah, it's when he doesn't have that ability, the hypertonia can make him quite clumsy and quite dangerous for himself. So the only thing I can really say is watch out, be aware. Let's try to avoid what we can avoid, and potentially hydrotherapy can be really effective, just to strengthen his mobility, get him in a pool. So that's what we do. We do hydrotherapy, but in the absence of, an allocation of a slot for hydrotherapy and limited space, and healthcare systems today are stretched, obviously. You can go to a pool yourself. What really worked for us as a sidestep slightly, we had one of those floaties with like a flotation device over the chest, and then that sort of connects to two individuals on the arms. That was really effective from us, because when kids usually learn to swim, they tend to fall over forwards. These kids are quite clumsy, for all their things. So when we had the flotation device at the front, it makes them lean backwards more. So the ability for him to be safe in the water was amplified a lot. So yeah, I'm at the point now where I can actually leave him alone. I would not allow him in the pool alone. I would still be there. But if I'm like 5 meters away from him and he's swimming on his own, I'm completely trusting that at all. So I'm not like constantly overwhelming him and holding him and stuff like that. He will be happily swimming himself. So definitely get maybe a setup like that. So with having said that, I think that's all I really wanted to say for today. Hopefully this has been helpful. And you can reach out. My email is rick, R-I-C-K 55 at hotmail.com. Feel free to just send me an email if you've got questions. And hopefully this can give you some insights here to help. All the best.